that needs to be taken. If we don't learn this, then obviously we cannot gain from its teachings. Now that we are learning it, we can gain from its teachings, but I will say that just learning it is not going to do a lot for you. It will do some for you, but it won't do a lot for you. If you want this to do a lot for you, then it's not enough to just learn it. I say this about everything that we learn because it's true. It's not enough to just learn it and to know the information that we're learning, but it's actually critical to apply it, to become intimate with the information and ask ourselves where I am, where do I stand in relationship with these ideas? So that challenges us, and what can I do to integrate these ideas in my life? And that will not be very easy. I just want to let you know that, and it will not. It's not being very easy is a sign of a level of impact that this book can have on your life, because anything that is easy cannot have significant impact. We have a teaching from our sages from Shaar Agra, according to in English we say, no pain, no gain. This is in Hebrew, based on the commensurate with the pain is the gain. That doesn't mean that life has to be oppressive and miserable. It just means that we have to put in effort. And when we put in effort, then we will definitely, without a doubt, find results. And I want you to know as well that those results don't happen overnight. There is nothing that you're going to learn here where suddenly tomorrow you're going to be a changed person. But what does happen is that when you stick with different ideas and understandings and you apply it to your life daily, repeatedly, day after day, in 6 months, you're going to turn around and say, wow, I cannot believe that I just had that circumstance or that situation, and I'm relatively calm. That's how you're going to see the results, and that's an enormous gift you can give yourself. And here, there's another thing that's happening at the very same time. So this is like a win-win-win-win-win. And that is that the road that the gate of trust gives us to calm, peace, tranquility, and I'll say also power, is the most authentic and genuine approach. It is 100% authentic and real. It's not what they call in today's modern day language, a hack. It's not outsmarting a system. Outsmarting a system always catches up with you. But this is the real deal. And the real deal is, as we're going to learn, to be in a conscious, intimate relationship with God as frequently as possible. So what ends up happening is you end up having this beautiful relationship with God, the source of everything, and the outcome of that is peace, tranquility, less ego, everything that makes a person a refined person, and everything that gives a person the emotional state that we all seek, happiness, etc. And we have this deep, intimate relationship with God. So it's like everything happening all together, which is why I call it a win-win-win-win-win. So that's tremendous. And that's why it's tremendous that we're gathered here and we're going to be going through this book. The book was written by Rabbeinu Bachya ibn Pekudah. You may be familiar with the word in Hebrew, ben, the son of. Ibn is the Aramaic, Sephardic, I should say, Arabic term for son of, because he was a Sephardic Jew, and he wrote this about 1,000 years ago. And he actually wrote it in Arabic, interestingly. And by the way, you may or may not know that all the progressive thinking, I think it was 1,000 years ago, was at that time actually being done in the Arab world. Mathematics, the sciences were being advanced in the Arab world at first, interestingly. That changed drastically with time and with history, but that's for a history lesson. And so he wrote this in Arabic, which was then translated into Hebrew. We're learning it from the English translation of the Hebrew, and I'm going to repeat for those who just came on that you want to get this book. That's the text. This is a text-based class. I will be reading out of this text and then discussing. So you want to get this book, and I put 2 links in the chat box. If for any reason you don't know how to access the chat box, you can send me an email after the class, and I can share the links with you where you can buy the book. This study also is very, very relevant. Unfortunately, it's very timely with what's going on in Israel now. Not only for us, because many, if not all of us, have been overwhelmed and are still somewhat overwhelmed by everything that's going on in Israel. Hopefully, that's the overwhelm is going away. But you can imagine what it would mean to go onto the front lines and to actually be an Israeli soldier. Most of the country is mobilized right now, and in one way or another are either facing the overwhelming crisis that they're dealing with and the tragedy, and for many walking right into harm's way, right into very dangerous circumstances. And the Rebbe used to emphasize that the most critical, the most important aspect of a soldier, the most important aspect to make sure that a soldier has in order to be successful at war is not his bulletproof vest, even though he must have a bulletproof vest, and it's not his Uzi, but it's actually his emotional state. It's critical for a soldier to be upbeat and positive. And by the way, that is a large part of the success of the Israeli army. And you've probably seen many videos or some videos of the soldiers singing, of the big singers in Israel being on the front line singing to the soldiers. I just saw a headline, I didn't watch it, but of all the soldiers at the border of Gaza right now. You see hundreds, thousands of soldiers singing together. It's amazing how they they're filled with faith and trust in Hashem. And that is the very most powerful tool any human being has in any circumstance, surely in a very extreme circumstance like they are in. And interestingly, as we're going to see, that there's a commandment in the Torah. There's a commandment, a prohibition, which is very interesting. It says that it's a prohibition for soldiers. It speaks to soldiers, which is towards the end of the book of Devarim, the 5th book of the 5 books of the Chumash, where Moshe tells the Jewish people, of course, he's speaking from God, Al Yera Levavchem, that let not your heart become scared. That's a prohibition. It's a commandment that God commands that a soldier be in a certain emotional state, which is very interesting and teaches us a tremendous amount. Firstly, God commands us about an emotional state, which means that we have control over our emotional state. That's number one. Otherwise, God can't command us. Right? How do you command me to be scared or not be scared? I mean, I'm scared, right? Now, by the way, for those who have studied, have been on the Tanya track for the last 10, 12, or however many years we've been doing the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, it discusses this. This is a significant aspect of Tanya, and that is that we do have a visceral reaction to things that we can't help, that we actually cannot help, right? So we see certain things and we get immediately triggered. However, what we can help is the moment after the trigger. So yes, someone may see something, get scared, gripped with fear for a moment, and that's not controllable. But the question is, will that fear remain? And that depends now on my conscious understanding and perspective and reaction to what it is that I just experienced. And it could be that a soldier gets called to the army, and the first moment they're gripped with fear, like, oh my gosh, I'm being drafted now, and I have to go to the front lines. But then he's with all of his, all of his comrades, all of his buddies, and they get themselves into a mindset that we are fighting a moral war. We're fighting the war of God to eradicate evil. We are part of the chosen people, and that's in some respect why Israel has the unfortunate, or the role to do what they need to do at this point juncture. So the most critical thing is not to be down in our spirits and not to be have a sense of hopelessness. Some people are of the opinion that this is actually a commandment to all Jews at all time. That's not only for a soldier when they're going to war, but at any time that a Jew has to be in a state of having bitachon, meaning trusting in Hashem. And we're going to understand how trust in God, trust in Hashem, is the only way a person can actually go through life without any concerns. That is, it's the only way. And we're going to and the gate of trust. Rabbeinu Bachya ibn Pekudah will spell that out very clearly. We'll see it quite early on, how clear this is. And we, as a chosen people, as the chosen people of God, we were chosen for many things. Overall, to be the people of the book, to be the people who were given the Torah, which was given exclusively to the Jewish people, and we were given 613 commandments. There are no other people that was given so many commandments, and that's because God has empowered us through being His people, which means we're filled with the Spirit of God, and that means in a very concrete way that we have a divine soul, which is a piece of God. It is a pure piece of God that lives within our body, within our being, within our body. And therefore, we have this unique connection to God. So we can live at every moment. We do live at every moment with God. And one distinction that we're going to want to become more and more familiar with is that whenever we speak about being with God or not being with God, we never literally mean that God is not with us or that we are not with God. What we mean is that we fall out of a state of awareness that we are with God and that God is with us. So when we say that God's not here, we never mean God's not here. We just mean that we don't see God because we are not plugged into that level of consciousness. So that's something that's very important to be aware of. Now, another thing that's very important to know about the Gate of Trust is the Gate of Trust is not an independent book. I know the one you have in your hands is an independent book, and that's because we do study it in distinctly. However, it's actually part of an entire book, which is called Chovot Halevavot, Duties of the Heart. And the reason why Rabbeinu Bachya ibn Pekudah wrote a book called Duties of the Heart, and we're going to actually see right at the beginning of this section, which is the 4th chapter of his book, Duties of the Heart, that it's really picking up from the previous chapter. And he's going to make a mention of that for a moment. But the reason why he wrote it is because we know that there are duties of the body, of the limbs, if you want to call it that. It's a mitzvah. A mitzvah is a duty of the body. We do this, we don't do that. There are many things we're supposed to do, and most mitzvahs are focused on that, on what to do, what not to do. I call that doing Jewish. Now, doing Jewish is very important. God commands us to do Jewish. But there's a huge difference between doing Jewish and being Jewish. And now, when I say being Jewish, I don't mean that you have to do anything to be Jewish. We are Jewish from birth or by choice when someone goes through a proper conversion according to Jewish law, right? So then we are Jewish, period. We're Jewish, right? So no one can take that away from a Jew, no matter what a Jew does or doesn't do. However, being Jewish, what I mean by being Jewish is when we consciously plug into who we are, which is Jewish, so that our entire being is Jewish. That when anyone encounters us, and when we encounter ourselves, if you will, our conscious state is one of being Jewish. And I'll give you an example of that in just a moment. But that's why he wrote a book called Chovot Halevavot, Duties of the Heart. Because most mitzvahs are duties of the limbs, but there are a few mitzvahs which are duties of the heart, very few. But those few mitzvahs are very critical in that who we're being impacts enormously what we're doing. So, for example, for many people, doing Jewish, or what others would call living a religious nor observant life, can be hard and oppressive and interfering. Because I have to do this, I have to do that. It's like someone can observe Shabbos, but they can't wait for Shabbos to be over because it's in my way. I want to go shopping, and I can't go shopping on Shabbos. So, I can't wait till it's over. I can run to the mall. Oh, I love Shabbos in the winter because then I can still get to the mall before the mall closes. That type of a thing. But when someone is living duties of the heart, that means that my thinking, my feelings are aligned with being Jewish or with God. So then what happens is that drives me to do the things that a Jew does. And so everything becomes harmonized and pleasant and really beautiful. So that's the benefit of the duties of the heart. And Rabbeinu Bachya, I think in some respect ahead of his times. It's not like the idea in and of itself is not novel, but he saw it as a social need that we can't just develop Jews who are doing. It's very hard to just do things without being in that place psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. Now, yesterday I got a call from a family. They're a family that I know who live in Israel. And they asked me, one of them is American, the other one's Israeli. And the American is being pressured by her parents to come back to America. It's dangerous in Israel. You got to get out there. Who knows what's going to happen? First of all, the rockets being shot into Israel, even though they told me they're in a relatively quiet and safe place. But there are rockets being shot into Israel every single day from Gaza. No one knows if Lebanon is going to open up as a front. May it not. And if it does, may Israel destroy their ability to ever threaten Israel again. But it's, there's a lot of concern. And so they have the ability, the husband's not being called up to the reserves, so they have the ability to leave. And interestingly, I just saw a headline just this morning about a lot of American Israelis who are conflicted about leaving or not leaving, what to do. Many are leaving, but they feel conflicted about their leaving. And so they were asking me my advice. And firstly, I told them I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're going to have to make that decision. I'm just going to give you some perspective. And it was a hard question to answer for me to tell, because I'm sitting here in Newtown, right? I feel safe. They don't. And so what should I be telling them? So the first thing is to clear out of my mind that the fact that I'm sitting in Newtown, that's irrelevant. I'm quite confident that if I were in Israel, I would be doing exactly what I was sharing with them, and that is, well, what will happen? Why do you want to leave? Number one is the right so that they'll be safer. It's safer outside of Israel, and so the question is that true? And where does that perspective come from? That it's safer outside of Israel. Now that is a normal perspective, like where many people. So I asked them, "Have you asked anyone else what to do? Have you spoken to other rabbis there?" And they said everyone told us that Israel is safer than America, but that doesn't make any sense, right? And they're right. What are you talking about? That's nonsense. Israel is safer than America, right? But it's not entirely nonsense. And actually, in many respects, it's not nonsense at all. It's actually very true. So on one hand, if we look at it the way we typically look at things, now I don't need to train you in how to look at things this way. If you look at things normally, and I say normally with quotations, right, then of course America is safer than Israel, right? However, is that the way we should be looking at things? Or should we should we be looking at things a little bit more deeply than that, because there is a deeper and truer reality? So number one is, what gives someone safety? Is it their location? And this is going to be directly what we're going to be discussing in the beginning of Chovot Halevavot. And I'm all sharing this by way of introduction. Is it what gives someone safety? Is it their location that gives them safety? Now, that doesn't mean that we should ever put ourselves in an environment which is physically unsafe, which is the case for Israel right now. It's physically unsafe. But if someone finds themselves there, And are they safer? Is there running from Israel making them safer? If God decides that they will be fine, will they be fine anywhere, even if they're going into Gaza? Yes. And if God decides that their time is up, does it make a difference whether they're in America or in Israel? No. So, and now, of course, I know I'm talking in great faith here, but that is where Rabbeinu Bachya is taking us. Now, what happens if someone really is aligned with that? Then they will be living in Israel and they're not living with fear. And I can tell you that there are many, if not most, Israelis who are in Israel now who are not in fear every moment of their life. Let me say this: when there is a prediction of a snowstorm in Newtown, there are more people in fear, or people who have higher levels of fear than many people in Israel right now. And that all comes out of this Shaar Habitachon, this trust. So I shared this perspective with them. And I also shared with them what impact would your leaving of Israel have on the morale of other Jews around you. That's also a consideration, right? You're not an individual, you're part of a collective whole. It's a big shift in perspective in how do we make decisions. Like a lot of people, I'll tell you a feeling that I had. I'm not saying that it's a right feeling. I'm just saying it's the feeling that I had, and it's not that anyone was doing or saying anything wrong. It's just something that came up in me every time someone asked me. Many people ask me if I have brothers or sisters or family in Israel, right? And every time I got the question, I just thought, it just struck me, right? Because now I understand where the question is coming from. It's coming from a sense of care and concern and love, and that do you have any? Because everyone, a lot of people know that I've had kids. I happen not to have any children in seminary there this year, but I did have. I had my kids there over the last few years. And that always is a big raise of concern. But on the other hand, I aspire to having my concern be for the fact, without any of my kids being, of course, we have greater responsibility, and we should have greater concern for our children and our family members and others. But it just awoke that within me, like, I'm hoping that I have concern for my brothers and sisters, the members of the Jewish people. So all of this is are impacts that have shifts that we benefit from as we move through Shaar Habitachon. And the author, again, he's in the middle of a book, so he's really building. So at this point in the book, which is chapter 4, he is assuming a few things about you, the student. Okay, so I want to let you know what he's assuming about us, so that we can just know that. And I'm also going to assume that all of us are on some level, it may be very minimal. That means we heard of these ideas, but we don't necessarily fully subscribe to them, or more that we subscribe to it on some level. He's assuming that we subscribe to these ideas. The first is that there's a God, right? Without a God, this isn't going anywhere, right? It's all based on the fact that there's a God, number one. Number two, it's based on the fact, it's based on the belief. So in other words, it's based on the belief in God. It's based on the belief in divine providence, that everything that happens in this world that happens to us is orchestrated by God. And I'll make the distinction I always make, because it's just important so you don't have this question. There are things that happen to us, and there are things that we do. Okay? The things that we do are part of our free choice. The things that happen to us, we don't get to choose, right? It's one of our great frustrations in life sometimes, right? But they happen to us. That, who gets to choose that? God. And nothing happens to you outside of God's desiring that should happen to you. That and this idea can raise a whole host of questions, because there are plenty of things that happen to all of us which were not pleasant in our life. And if we're saying that everything comes from God, or that God has that happen to we that can be that can raise a lot of challenges to God, but that doesn't change the fact that everything that happens to us is happening by divine providence. And I would like, as I always say, it's happening for us. As difficult as that may it may be for us to perceive that. So assuming that we believe in God is assuming that everything that happens in life to us is happening by divine providence. It's assuming that God cares about me. You know what that means? God cares about me. That's a tremendous thing. Many people go through life not knowing if there's anyone that cares about them. When I say cares about them fully, like fully cares about you, 100% cares about you. And you may be right. I don't know. It's not that hard to go through life and not have anyone that fully cares about you. Most people care about other people conditionally. And so that's not fully caring. I mean, you know what that means, as we're going to learn. That means I can't trust you because I don't know the limits of your care. So we have that. We believe there's a God. We believe that everything that happens is by divine providence. That means God's orchestrating it. And we believe that God cares. And we believe that God is compassionate. It's critical to believe that God's compassionate. Why? Because if God is compassionate, then we know that God cares, feels for me. So even when things are not good, if something is not good for me, God has compassion. And God desires that it should be better. God wants it to be better because he cares about me and he's compassionate. I'm going to add another thing. God is omnipotent. That means God is all powerful. God can do anything. Do you know anyone that can do anything? I know people who think they can do anything. even after it's been proven that they can't do, right? But can you do, God can do anything. You know what that means? You are well connected. That is amazing. You think knowing the CEO is significant, knowing, you're friends with some billionaire. You are in a relationship with the omnipotent Almighty, which is why we call him Almighty God, who cares about you and is filled with compassion for you. Life doesn't get better. You can't ask for anything more. And one last thing is that we were put in this world to serve. I'm going to say it in a more blunt, explicit way, and then in a more relatable way. We were put in this world to serve God. That's the more blunt statement, and the more understandable statement is we were put in this world to fulfill the purpose that God put us here for. Right? So those are all of the things that we need to know, and it's assumed that we believe as we go into this class. And if you have a question about any of these that you would like to ask now, you can unmute yourself and ask me. And that would be important just to get any big elephants, I don't know, not elephants, but big obstacles, I should say, out of the way to help us force forward. And if you have a big question about any of these, which would be very understandable and reasonable, I don't know that we'll get the obstacle out of the way, but we'll start chipping away at the obstacle, which will be very important. Because all of these ideas are big ideas. Okay, so there's a God. We believe there's a God. We believe that everything that happens in our lives is orchestrated by God. We believe that God cares about us. God is compassionate. That God is omnipotent, is all powerful, is almighty, and that we were put in this world to live out the purpose for which God put us here, to the best of our ability, to the fullest of our ability. Okay, any questions, comments, objections, rebuttals? Okay, we're good. Fantastic. If you do have a comment, you can just unmute yourself and I will hear you and you can say it. Yes, someone just posted in the chat, Bonnie, every night I ask, where are you in all this? Excellent. So I just want to say thank you, Bonnie, for posting that. That is a great question. And I can't imagine anyone that doesn't ask that question, especially in light of what's going on now, right? And you know who has the answer to that question? Nobody. And I know that that's difficult for us. That's very, very difficult for the human mind. The human mind is a tool that likes answers. And the response I just gave you was there is no answer. We don't know. That's part of dealing with, being in a relationship with an infinite God. Right? So, they say if we're going to engage with God, we're going to engage with God fully. We're not going to start cutting God down to the size of what I want God to be. So God is omnipotent. God is all powerful. God is endlessly compassionate, endlessly loving, endlessly caring. And God also, being an infinite being, does things that my mind will never be able to understand. And that's frustrating. And that's why, as we're going to, a big part of what we're going to be learning is, some of you have heard this from me a lot, and that's good. The more we hear it, the better it is. And the more I can say it, the better it is for me. And we're going to learn that when we confront realities that our mind cannot grasp, we must slip into a deeper place in our being, which is called soul, and we live out of faith. That's what faith is. And that is something we need to be doing now in relationship to what's going on in Israel. And that's what, that's exactly how a person goes into war, with faith. Don't go with your mind, boy. That's how you get terrified. And that would be it, right? That's where the fear comes from. We go in with faith. And so a lot of this book, really, a lot of what we're going to be learning is how to be a genuinely faithful person. But the word for faith over here, we're going to say, is trust. And I'm going to speak about that soon, the difference between faith and trust, as part of our introduction. We're going to be learning really how to develop a superior level of consciousness. That's what it is. I'm going to just give you, I want to make this as concrete as possible. Everything I teach, I like to do in that way so we can benefit practically from it. It's possible. I don't speak to people about this very much, but just this example came to me, so I'm just going to say it. A man saying this to women, so maybe I should behave myself. But it's possible that there's a woman. It's possible a woman is you. I'm not saying this as critically, that it's possible there's a woman who has a hard time leaving her house and going into a social event if her nails aren't done. It's possible, right? Now that is a level, an expression of our state of consciousness. Okay, the level that we are living on. I'm not saying it's a bad level. I'm not saying it's a good level. I'm just saying it as a point of awareness that when we notice these things about ourselves, we say, oh, this is significant. Is this significant to everyone? The people who it's not significant, why? Could be for many reasons. Some people don't care how they look. That may not be a very good thing. That may not. I would lean in that direction. People don't care how they look, right? But then there is, then there are people who are just not that consumed in how they look. Or there are people who always want to present themselves beautifully, which I think is a beautiful thing. But sometimes circumstance doesn't work out, and that's not what they're consumed in. In other words, it's not what they're consumed in. Their level of consciousness is higher than that, even though that's something that they try to live with. But when there are more important things, there are more important things. And going to a social event, I didn't have to. Unfortunately, I wanted to get them done, I couldn't get them done. It's like it doesn't stop them in any way. I hope you're getting the gist of what I'm saying. Now, there are countless examples of that we are confronted with on a daily basis. A lot of which has to do with the way we emotionally react to things, as to what our level of consciousness is. So, one of the most beautiful things that we can do with our lives is raise our level of consciousness so it's superior to what it is currently. And then after you raise it, you know what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to raise it again to be superior to where it is then. And that's life. That is a beautiful life. That's what we want to achieve. And we're also going to confront in this class a lot of subtleties, very fine, nuanced differences between one state and another state. But those refined, nuanced differences make all the difference between one state and another state. So it's critical to be able to differentiate, to understand the difference between this and this, even though they very much look the same or almost the same. So they look very much the same, but they are very, very different. It's sort of like the nuanced distinction I just made, right? That there can be someone, someone could say, "What's the difference? Does it really make a big difference whether I do care or don't care about my nails being done? What's the big sin that it's important to me to have my nails done, and that I don't like going out, right?" I'm just saying it's a subtlety that should speak to us, not in a critical way, not in criticism, in awareness of where we're at. Also, to be able to make the distinction between whether I don't care about how I look or I care about how I look, and sometimes circumstances, I'm not looking the way I would love to, but that's also fine. So these are subtleties in life. Ultimately, what we're going to discover is that as we are able to surrender ourself in light of something that's far more significant and important than what I want, then we are living in the reality of God, and we can trust in God. That's a very frightening thing to do. It's very frightening to surrender ourselves. When I say surrender, I don't mean in a defeatist way. I mean in a warrior way, if that's okay. What I mean is that we are choosing to surrender my interest on behalf of elevated interest. You understand? So it's not like surrender, like, oh, well, what can I do? I'm stuck. No, you're not stuck. You can still pursue your entire, pursuits and whatever you want to get out of life as much as you want. No one's going to stop you from doing that. However, you have a choice as well to live life a little bit differently and to surrender those natural pursuits that every body, as in a physical body, right, or as in tiny language, every animal soul and ego wants to pursue, and say, I'm surrendering that. I'm giving that up. I want to live more elevated. I want to know why I'm here and live towards that. And that requires surrendering self in order to live in the reality of God. This is, we're going to see, the only way that someone is going to get to be able to achieve genuine peace and tranquility in life, where things are not constantly rattling us. The reason why we're constantly rattled is because my life is being disturbed. The life that I don't want to surrender, so I'm trying desperately to hold on to and control. And the reality is that most of our life we can't control, but we're living as if we can. And in doing that, we're constantly rattled. We're constantly disturbed. And that creates a lot of frustration and anxiety. And then, by the way, as you probably know, although most, if not all of us are of an older generation than the generation I'm speaking of, not an older generation, just older than. And that is that anxiety has risen significantly in our youth, and it's at I don't know what would you call it, epidemic levels, or whatever the right term would be over there. And it's a really big issue. So and this is the antidote to all of that. Okay, so there's another very important thing that we need to know before we begin the class and before we begin the actual text, and that is the difference between emuna and bitachon. Emuna is faith, bitachon is trust. There's a great teacher by the name of the Ramban, not Rambam, but Ramban, with an N at the end as opposed to an M. And the Ramban, otherwise known as Nachmanides, he writes that in his book on faith and trust, that the difference between faith and trust, the difference between faith and trust is that faith is the belief in God. Now, if you go on the street and you ask people, do you believe in God? Many, many people, thank God, thanks to Abraham, our forefather, who began spreading monotheism, many people believe in God. Believing in God means I believe there's a God. Now, if you look at them, observe their life, it doesn't always seem that they believe in God. Of course, much of the life is lived either not in alignment with or sometimes in great contradiction to God. But that's the power, if you will, or that is the nature of belief. Belief is I believe in an idea, but that belief is somewhat vague. It's a belief. It's something I know to be, right? And because it's vague, it leaves room for me to subscribe to it, and yet in behavior be in contradiction to it. We call this in Hasidic language makif. It's vague, it's encompassing, it's not something that has permeated me, that I have absorbed and become intimate with. Whereas bitachon is trust. Trust is that my emotional state is aligned with my belief. That's a sign that someone has integrated their belief into themselves in such a significant way that they actually are living what it is that they believe. That's the difference between emunah and bitachon, faith and trust. And the Ramban uses the analogy of a tree and fruit. He says, you cannot have fruit without a tree. We all understand that. But you can have a tree without fruit. The tree is emunah, is faith in God. But the fruit are bitachon, is trust in God. It's possible for there to be a tree, and it's very common that there is a tree of faith, but it's not bearing the fruit of bitachon, of trust. So the person has faith, but they live their whole life in all the worries that any other person lives. But then there's a person who actually grows the fruit, which is what we're going to be doing together. We grow the fruits that we actually are trusting in God. We are trusting God. And that's the fruit that come off the tree. So trust must have first, as I said earlier, the belief in God. But the belief in God alone doesn't give off the fruit of trust. We have to develop those fruit. And by way of example, in understanding the differences between the two, when someone has faith, we will depend on God. Someone who has faith depends on God. I mean, he said, listen, it's in God's hands. Whatever God decides will be. That's someone who believes in God. But someone who trusts in God, you know what someone who trusts God says? I know that God will help me. I am certain that God will help me. That's what trust is. Because I trust that God is omnipotent, is caring, is benevolent, and is compassionate. So I know that God is going to help me. Faith is what a thief can have. You know, a person can go to shul in the morning and daven, puts on tefillin if he's a man. He davens. He davens that his day be successful. What's he doing today? He's got a scheme to rip off a couple of people. And he's praying to God that his efforts should be successful. When someone has faith, they can actually carry that contradiction. And when you look at people who you feel are living a contradiction, they're doing that because they only have faith in God. They don't have trust in God. If someone has trust in God, would they be ripping off people? Taking advantage of people? No, I put all of my affairs in the hands of God. Now, I do what I have to do. I have a business. I go to work, right? But ultimately, my affairs and the success of my affairs are going to be determined by God. Someone who has faith believes that God is ultimately good. God's ultimately good. Ultimately, it's going to be good. You know, now it's a misery, but hopefully God has reasons for doing it. Someone who trusts in God is trusting that God will make it good now. Now, some of you are probably thinking, how can you say that? How do you know? I've already said enough for you to answer that question, but we're going to need to hear it many times to begin to know how someone can actually know that God will make it good now. There's something called hope. A lot of people hope that things will get better. Hope has no confidence in it. Hope is just, you know when someone has hope, by the way, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe explained this. He said that when someone is drowning in water, God forbid, and they see a straw, a strand of straw, right? What do? They reach out to grab the straw because they hope that maybe the straw is going to hold them up somehow, right? The moment there's no straw, there's not even the last straw on the camel's back, so to speak, then there's no hope. They lose all hope. There's nothing. Where? How am I going to save myself? There's no way to save myself, right? You know when trust begins? Trust begins when there's no straw. When we're not relying on anything other than God. That is trust. But what are you trusting in? There's no straw, there's no wood to grab, there's nothing to save you. It's not possible for you to survive. I'm trusting in God. Of course, God cares about me, and God can help me in any situation because He's all-powerful, He's almighty, and I trust in God. Even though I have no idea how it's possible for me to survive, I don't need to know. I trust in God. That's how radical and powerful trust in God is. Hope doesn't live in a guarantee. Hope is when nothing is guaranteed, but there's a possibility. But trust, trust is when a person is absolutely certain, even though there is no guarantee. There's nothing to rely on. Okay. How are we doing, everyone? Any questions or comments? Otherwise, we'll start a little bit of the text today so we can get our feet wet. Okay, seems that we're good. Just a moment, everyone. Okay. I also want to thank many of you who, almost everyone, for having your screens on. I know some of you may not be able to, and that's fine. It's fine. But if you can have your screen on, it's very, very helpful because it's very hard to teach to a black screen. And you'll get more from me if I see you. Okay? So I appreciate that. Okay, so let's go to page 2. If you don't have the book yet, that's fine. You'll hear me read it, and it's all good. So in the introduction to Shaar Habitachon, and the word for bitachon I saw was asked, the word in Hebrew for trust is bitachon, which, by the way, bitachon is, if you listen to the Mishaberach I make every Shabbos for Israel, you'll hear me say Shomrei Habitachon. I make a Mishaberach for those who dwell in Israel, the Chayal Tzva Haganah Yisrael, which is the IDF, V'Shomrei Habitachon. Shomrei Habitachon are security forces, because the word bitachon means secure. It means trust, and it also means security. When does a person feel secure? When they have trust. Do you ever ask someone to do something? You ever ask your spouse or your child to do something, and you're not sure whether it's going to get done? Which basically means you don't trust that it's going to get done, right? And you blame them, of course, because they're not trustworthy. That's why you don't trust them. That's a subject in and of itself, right? By the way, the best way to get people to be trustworthy is to actually trust them, right? As long as they know we're going to always come back to make sure it gets done, they don't have to worry about it. So they don't have to be trustworthy about it. Oh, well, she's going to come back and take care of it. So, but anyway, so when you give something to someone who you know is going to get it done, you know they're going to get it done, right? You're secure about it. You feel secure. Someone asks you, are you sure we're going to have it by 5? Absolutely. I asked John to do it. When I asked John, it's done. By 5 o'clock, we will have what we need. Oh, yeah, I'm using John. I'm sorry, Candy. I was trying to use a neutral name. Okay, but anyway, but it happens to be true. It happens to be true. Okay, that's why we feel, that's why trust and security go together. And actually, in Hebrew is a very fascinating language. So it means the same thing, because trust and security happen together. When there's trust, there's security. Another interesting thing is that there's a word for, if you ever see a bricklayer, they smear cement, a layer of cement, and then they put the next brick, smear a layer of cement, the next brick, right? The Hebrew word for smearing a layer of something is called tach. Tach is to cement something, actually. How do you cement a relationship? Because tach is in the word bitachon. It's the root of the word bitachon. How do you cement a relationship? You have trust. And if you don't trust, you should know that that's your problem, not the other person's problem. So at least act trusting. Even though you're scared the whole day, are they doing it? Are they doing it? Did they do it? Did they do it? That's my problem. I got a problem. But I'm not asking any questions. I am trusting that they are doing it. And it could be that they didn't do it. Say, oi. Right? They didn't do it. And you trust them again, and you trust them again. You do that with children, and you develop very trustworthy, independent children. Because you're relying on them, you're showing them trust, and that brings out the best of a person. Okay. I know you might be thinking, well, if you knew my husband. Yeah, okay, I'm not going to pursue this subject anymore, so let's continue. So the introduction to Shaar Habitachon, the gate of trust, the author discusses the benefits that having bitachon, trust in God, brings a person, both in Torah and worldly matters. You see, the author was a very good marketer, and he knew the first thing you have to do is show a person the benefits they're going to have. Before he shows us how to have bitachon, he shows us the benefits. So he's showing us the benefits. In total, he lists 5 Torah benefits and 5 worldly benefits. So 5 spiritual benefits and 5 worldly benefits that we have from trusting in God. So the author begins his introduction to Shaar Habitachon by explaining the connection between this gate and the preceding gate. This is going to be very brief, how he just draws a bridge between the last chapter and the next chapter. The previous gate was Shaar Habitachon, the gate of the service of God. He was explaining the importance of serving God. He explains that the reason why he placed Shaar Habitachon immediately after Shaar Habitachon is that having trust in God is paramount in order to be a true servant of God. Part of serving God is that I trust you. Part of me being in a relationship with my spouse, with my children, is I trust them, or with anyone, that I trust them. So it's like critical to the relationship. So he explains, and you'll notice that the words in bold are the literal, the translation of the actual words he's using, and the words which are not in bold are the words that they insert in the translation to help us understand the sequence, the sentences flow in English. You know what, actually, because we only have 2 minutes left, let us jump, and we're going to do this whenever I feel it relevant, to the bottom of the page, of page 2. Okay? That firstly, he quotes, and I'm going to paraphrase sometimes I'll read, where it says most necessary. Rabbi Avram, the son of Rambam, Maimonides, he said that one of the choicest character traits a person can have is trust in God. By the way, if you have trust in God, you'll also trust people. There's a bunch of reasons why that is. Firstly, if you trust in God, you will see the godliness, the divine presence of people, not their bodily presence, much more. And because you're used to trusting, you will trust people as well. Even when they are not trustworthy, they may not be fully trustworthy. And that's a big gift that you give to people, to be a presence of trust for them. But he says it's one of the finest character traits that a person can have, both in relationship with God, I would say, and also in relation with others. And the Rebbe once wrote to someone something really, really beautiful. So in the last paragraph, I'm going to read this. From a letter of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, we must know that faith and trust cannot merely remain in our thoughts. Oh no, this is just a statement. I'm sorry, I was thinking about a different letter, but there's also that faith and trust cannot merely remain in our thoughts. Rather, they must permeate the totality of our lives. The first step of faith is that God controls the world. If God can care for billions of people, we can be sure that in regard to personal matters, we will see the fulfillment of the promise stated in the verse, which we say, by the way, at the end of davening, when we say Al Tira Mipachat Pisom. Some of you are familiar with that song from services, right? So the last word, which I said this on Simchas Torah from the top of the ladder, Ani Asisi, Ani Eza, Ani Esba Ba'Malit. I have made you, and I will carry you, and I will sustain and deliver you. That's what God, the prophet Isaiah, told the Jewish people from God. I got you covered. I got you back. You don't have to worry. So the point that the Rebbe is making is, if God is caring for billions of people, or as the Rebbe told other people that you're worried about your livelihood, God provides food for every single bird in the universe. Right? They all have what they need. You think God can't find a way to provide for you as well? But we worry. We're filled with worry. I know that worry very well, just like you do, right? We're so worried. But as we plug more and more into Hashem, we're going to have less and less worry, because we're going to have more and more trust. So this was the introduction. Next week we will continue right into the text. And if there's anyone you know that I think we have about 15 or so, maybe a couple more women who are signed up to this series. Hundreds of women could benefit from this. If there's anyone you know, any friend you have who you think, in particular local people, although others are more than welcome, that you think can benefit from this, you just heard the introduction, so you got a gist of where we're going here. You should encourage them to take the course. They'll be able to listen to the audio of the first class as well to make up for it. It would be a shame that anyone who could benefit from this is not benefiting from it. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. May we all hear good news on behalf of our entire people. And looking forward to continuing next Monday morning.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Welcome. You're welcome.